The Cult of the Outsider. This esoteric group remained in the shadows throughout Dishonored 1 and 2, finally emerging in Death of the Outsider. Who are they? Where did they come from? And what are their goals? To answer this, we must first take a look at their predecessors, the Envisioned. 4,000 years before the events of Dishonored, there was no outsider, no void god. As I mentioned in a previous video, the void is a dimension that hungers for representation, not a thing, but a chaotic wellspring of potential that yearns for thingness. You can see this by the objects from the real world that appear in the void. The physical world is reflected in the void, and in turn reflects the void. Each is tightly bound to the other, but relies on a firm separation to maintain stability. A void deity is an integral part of this balance. There have been other void gods in the past, almost all of them lost to prehistory. Some had a physical form. Others may have existed as nothing more than an abstract series of music notes. They never overlap, and there may be long periods of time between when there is no such avatar. It was during one of these godless periods that a group of people found, in the mountains above what would become Karnaca, an ancient object, the Eye of the Dead God. This eye was all that remained of a previous void entity, and though dead, it still held the power to reveal the way into the void. It was here that the boundary between the real world and the void was weakest. By interpreting the flow of stars in the sky and other signs, this early cult learned of the need for a new void god. They found a young man, orphaned on the streets of some ruined ancient city, who fit the prophetical requirements. They took him into the void's ritual hold, bound him, drugged him so that he forgot his own name, which was a requirement of the ritual, and cut his throat using a twin-bladed knife. The outsider was created. His body remained encased in the stone-like elemental material of the void, while his spirit was free to embody and focus its energies. The newly made outsider developed an intense curiosity about what people do when granted power over others, and he granted these powers to those he considered interesting enough to change world events. He did this through use of his mark, which he had forgotten was his own name. The cultists called themselves the Envisioned, after the eye that showed them their task. Determined to prevent anyone from undoing their work, they lingered in the void, guarding the ritual hold. Over thousands of years they morphed into creatures of void stone, losing their humanity but remaining obsessed with their goal. What was the point of all this? Did they really think that the outsider would be inclined to grant them magical powers after what they'd done to him? That seems unlikely. The Envisioned left behind few writings or evidence of their actions, and after passing into the void are lost to history. 2,000 or so years later, a cataclysmic event called the Great Burning marked the beginning of the world's calendar. Little is known of this event, only that a nomadic army burned and pillaged across the Isles, starting a dark age during which many records were lost. It seems unlikely that the cult in Death of the Outsider is the same organization as the original Envisioned, given the large span of time. Before the rise of the Abbey, outsider worship was widespread, so there would be no need of a cult to him. Only after around 1700 and the Rectification War that eradicated all other faiths would such a cult likely form. By the time of the events of Dishonored, there could in fact be many such cults. This one in particular was almost certainly in a position to exploit an event that occurred only recently. In 1849, Delilah managed to escape the void through a ritual at the home of Aramis Stilton. This tore a new hole in the boundary between the real world and the void. Like adding new holes to Swiss cheese, it weakened an already weak membrane in close proximity to the Eye of the Dead God, still buried under what was now Shinderi Peak. Workers at the Shinderi North Quarry began having strange hallucinations. seeing whole sections of the mines disappear, then reappear. People wink in and out of existence, and sometimes going mad. The mine was abandoned by all but a single worker, who found the eye. Touching it, the eye once again revealed the way into the void. Whether this was the birth of the cult of the outsider, or whether they already existed and found out about it, is not clear. But they took up residence in the quarry, establishing a library, studying the eye, entering the void and encountering the Envisioned, but not allowed to approach the ritual hold. Near the end of Death of the Outsider, you can see the forms of those who tried, turned to stone for all eternity. Cult members are required to forsake worldly possessions and concerns in order to devote themselves to the void. Their ultimate goal is to become the same stone-like creatures as the original Envisioned, and you can see many of them have already begun this metamorphosis, with parts of their flesh covered by stone. Some members, such as Antero, change their minds as they begin to lose their humanity, and are executed for this heresy. Others, such as Malchiodi, study the outsider to such an extent that they learn terrible secrets. Malchiodi learns the truth of the outsider's name, that giving it back to him will undo the ritual that made him. He is so entranced by the idea of enacting such a change that he risks trying to enter the ritual hold, and is killed for it. The Envisioned attacks slowly, but with powerful blows that can kill immediately, and even use corpses of cultists to summon void effigies to fight for them for a time. Cultists believe they can still speak, but choose not to. The cultists worship the outsider, but he does not grant them his mark, calling those who venerate him unhinged. Therefore, no member of the cult is marked, but they carry many bone charms. The final chapter of Death of the Outsider includes 24 bone charms. From a gameplay perspective, this makes no sense, since you are almost at the end and can't make much use of them. But from a lore perspective, it shows how obsessed the cultists are with wielding void powers of some kind in the absence of being worthy of a mark. This makes them dangerous in combat, as they can use the same enhancements that the player has been able to obtain throughout the games. Though the cult vows to seek no solace in mundane things and put aside distractions from the void, they still require basics like food, supplies, and new members. For this they utilize the Eyeless, a gang first mentioned briefly in Dishonored 2 in one of Luca Abel's public announcements. This gang is made of occult seekers from all social classes and walks of life, from street thugs and prize fighters to politicians and aristocrats. Some are even former Brigmore witches. It's from the Eyeless that the cult recruits those deemed worthy or helpful to their cause. It's likely that this is how they were able to erase all records of Shinderi North Quarry from public knowledge, thus keeping their location secret. 3 leading members of the Eyeless are Ivan Jacobi, Shan Yun, and Dolores Michaels. Each has their reason for joining. Jacobi has long been obsessed with death and the afterlife, ever since living among his family's ancestral crypt. Shan Yun yearns for inspiration to reinvigorate his singing career, and Michaels desires immortality. They each believe the void is the key to these goals and will do anything to achieve them. They dutifully guard the twin-bladed knife against any who might seek to use it to destroy the outsider, and they use their influence to help the cult, which they are on the cusp of being invited to join when Billy Lurk comes on the scene. A less senior Eyeless, Eleuterio Cienfuegos, is a simple pharmacist by day, but is obsessed enough with the void to make haunting paintings depicting his visions of it. Throughout Death of the Outsider, Billy can collect these paintings instead of those by Sokolov. When he experiences a change of heart similar to Antero, the gang has him killed and used for a sanguine infusion, a horrific practice in which the blood of a dying person is transfused into eyeless members so that they can momentarily experience the void while still alive. Jacobi himself carries this out on Cienfuegos, Dolores Michaels then seizes all his assets, including one of his paintings and some laudanum that Billy can use during the bank job mission. Interestingly, the Issas Gang may actually predate the current Cult of the Outsider, as its first members were participants in a seance held in the 1700s by a grieving Serkonan duchess. But by the time of Death of the Outsider, the cult is in control of the gang, using it to wield power and recruit members. During Dowd's search for the twin-bladed knife that could unmake the Outsider, he was captured by witches and turned over to the Issas, who were enthralled by his magical and fighting abilities, and thus forced him to fight at the Albarca Baths, where Billy rescues him. At the end of Death of the Outsider, Billy has a choice. Kill the Outsider using the knife, or give him back his name, undoing the ritual and turning him human again. If she kills him, his eyes briefly turn red, similar to the eye of the dead god. However, in regards to the larger impact on the world, there is no choice. Either way, the Void will lose its avatar. There is no one to say who will and won't be touched by its magic. Is this a good thing or a bad thing? Throughout the game, Billy encounters hollows, regions where both the Void and alternate timelines bleed into the world. Billy has been given a sliver of the eye of the dead god, which allows her to see these things, in addition to a black shard arm made of Void material that grants her powers not mediated by the Outsider. We read about the events at Shindari Peak, where the boundary with the Void is thinnest. We experienced the warped reality at Stilton's Manor. These are all symptoms of the Void slipping, as the walls that keep it separate from the physical world begin to crumble. The Outsider, and all Void gods before him, are a central foundation of these walls. It's not simply a matter of more people being able to channel magic. It's more like an oil gusher spraying everywhere uncontrollably and occasionally igniting. We can finally deduce an answer to the question at the beginning of this video. What was the goal of the Envisioned in creating the Outsider? They may have become obsessed with the Void after continued exposure, like an addict caring only for the next dose. But their original motivation might have been to stop the chaos of the godless Void erupting into their world, to maintain the order of our existence, as the cultists themselves say. If this is truly the case, it's clear that sooner or later the Void will need a new god, or the world may be ripped apart.